Prologue. The kingdom of Valanthra had not seen peace in over 2 decades. King Kaelen Ironfang, ruler of the Ironfang pack and warlord of the north, stood on the highest balcony of the obsidian fortress, his wolf's golden eyes glinting under the looming blood moon. Below, the war drums of invading packs thundered across the valley. He had conquered countless enemies with fire and Fang, crushed rebellions with merciless precision. But this time, the war was different. The Shadow Claw Alliance, a coalition of rival packs and witches, demanded one thing in exchange for halting their siege: take a bride of royal blood. Bind your pack to the Crescent Court, or watch your kingdom burn. Kaelen snarled at the very thought. He had sworn never to mate, never to take a Luna. Love was weakness, and weakness had destroyed his family long ago. But then, she arrived. Lyriana, last princess of the Crescent Court, born under a prophecy that foretold she would either save or destroy the entire werewolf race. When Kaelen first saw her, bound in silver chains, a political offering from her father, he expected a trembling, spoiled royal. Instead, he found a woman with storm-gray eyes that held defiance, magic, humming beneath her skin, and a soul far too wild to be caged. "I am no one's bargaining chip," she spat the first time they met. "Then be my queen," he growled, "and I will set you free." Neither of them knew then that this union, forged in blood and necessity, would ignite a passion that could either save Valanthra or doom it to ash. Chapter 1. The throne room of the Ironfang fortress was carved from black stone and wolf bone, every inch a reminder of power. Kaelen sat upon the high throne, clad in obsidian armor, his wolf pacing beneath his skin. Warriors knelt in a semicircle before him as the princess was brought in. Lyriana walked with her chin held high, despite the silver cuffs digging into her wrists. Her gown, though exquisite, was torn at the hem from the long journey through hostile lands. Her scent, wild jasmine and storm rain, hit Kaelen's senses like lightning. His wolf snarled mine before he even spoke a word. "You stand before the Alpha of the Ironfang," the herald announced. Lyriana's gaze flicked over Kaelen like a blade, unyielding. "Then the Alpha of the Ironfang should remove these chains if he wishes to speak to me as an equal." Gasps filled the hall. No one addressed Kaelen Ironfang like that. For the first time in years, Kaelen felt something other than war hunger, amusement. "Equal?" he said, voice low and dangerous. "You are here as a peace offering, princess. You will be my bride, bear my heirs and unite our packs. That is your only purpose." Lyriana's lips curved in a cold, defiant smile. "Then you will find me a very inconvenient bride, Alpha." And so began their war. A war of wills, a war of hearts. Chapter 2. The heavy doors of the Ironfang throne room slammed shut behind her with a thunderous echo, sealing Princess Lyriana inside a world she did not understand, a world of wolves and iron, blood and dominance. She took in her surroundings with a quick, calculating glance. Every wall in this hall was carved with snarling wolves, their eyes inlaid with glowing amber stones. The air reeked of musk, steel, and something primal, an underlying scent that made the fine hairs on her neck stand on end. It was the Alpha's scent. Wild, potent, male. Chains rattled at her wrists as she moved, silver biting into her skin, and she fought not to flinch. When her escort, a brute of a warrior with a scar from jaw to collarbone, gripped her arm tighter. "Release her," came the deep, resonant voice from the throne. The warrior hesitated. "Alpha, I said release her." The voice was soft, but dangerous in a way that promised pain if disobeyed. The guard let go instantly, stepping back with a bow of his head. Lyriana flexed her fingers, relieved to have even that small victory. She turned her attention to the man on the throne, King Kaelen Ironfang. He was nothing like she'd expected, not a grizzled warlord in rusted armor, but a man in his prime, broad-shouldered, powerfully built, his black hair falling in loose waves to his jaw. His eyes, though, she had never seen eyes like his, a golden feral glow that seemed to see straight through her. "You sent for me," she said evenly. "I presume you have something to say, Alpha, or is intimidation the only language you speak? A low rumble filled the air. It took her a heartbeat to realize it wasn't the warriors around them, it was him. A growl. Kaelen rose from the throne with predatory grace, his boots silent on the black stone floor as he descended the steps toward her. Every instinct screamed at Lyriana to step back, but she locked her knees and stood her ground. When he stopped a mere breath away, she had to tilt her chin up to meet his gaze. He was taller, broader, and far more dangerous up close. His scent hit her harder now. Pine smoke, rain-soaked earth, and the undeniable musk of wolf. "You will learn, princess," he murmured, his voice like dark velvet, "that I do not need to raise my voice to command obedience." Lyriana's lips curved into a defiant smile. "Then you will learn, Alpha, that I do not bow simply because a man demands it." Something flickered in his eyes. Interest? Amusement? Desire? She couldn't tell. Kaelen tilted his head, studying her as one might study a beautiful but venomous creature. "Your father should have warned you," he said at last. "Defiance in my court has consequences. And perhaps you should have warned him," she shot back, "that I am not a lamb to be led to slaughter." A collective inhale filled the hall. She had just compared marriage to him to death. The Alpha's growl deepened, reverberating through the room like thunder. "Everyone out," he commanded, without looking away from her. His warriors hesitated only for a fraction of a second before they began filing out, silent as shadows. The heavy doors boomed shut again, leaving her alone with him. Kaelen took another step closer, invading her space entirely. "You are either very brave," he said softly, "or very foolish." Lyriana's pulse pounded in her ears, but she forced her voice steady. "Or perhaps I simply refuse to be broken." He studied her for a long, tense moment. Then, to her shock, he laughed. A low, dangerous sound. "Good," he said. "A weak Luna would never survive here." Before she could respond, he reached up and, so quickly she couldn't react, unclasped the silver cuffs from her wrists. They hit the floor with a dull clang. Her skin stung where the silver had burned her, and he glanced at the red marks with a frown. "You were brought here as a bride," he said, his tone unreadable. "Not a prisoner. Remember that, princess." And with that, he turned and strode toward the throne again, leaving her standing. In the center of the vast hall, her heart pounding and her thoughts a tangled mess. She had expected a monster. Instead, she had found a man far more dangerous. A man who might consume her whole if she wasn't careful. And for the first time since she had been offered up like a sacrificial lamb, Lyriana felt something unexpected. Hope. Chapter 3. The echo of his footsteps faded into the shadowed recesses of the Ironfang throne room, leaving only the pounding of Lyriana's heart in her own ears. The weight of Kaelen's presence lingered even in his absence, a pressure in the air like the moment before a lightning strike. She flexed her raw wrists where the silver had burned. The faint crimson marks glimmered against her pale skin, and though she wanted to ignore them, she could still feel the strange heat of his fingers brushing her when he had unclasped the cuffs. "Not a prisoner," he had said. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. A bride is just a prisoner in a prettier cage, but the fact remained, he had removed her chains. He had dismissed the entire court just to speak to her alone. And when she'd stood toe-to-toe with him, refusing to cower, he had not struck her down. Instead, he had smiled, a dangerous man with a dangerous smile. The chamber they had assigned her was opulent by mortal standards, though it still felt as though she had been given a gilded cell. The walls were carved from black volcanic stone, etched with silver runes that pulsed faintly in the torchlight. The bed was massive, draped in dark furs that still carried the faint musk of wolf. A single window, narrow and arched, looked out over the Ironfang territory. A sea of evergreen forest shrouded in mist, mountains rising like jagged teeth beyond. She stood at the window, gripping the sill as the night air swept in. Far below, the training grounds stretched like a battlefield, dozens of warriors sparring beneath the full moon. She watched as they shifted mid-combat, bones snapping and reshaping in flashes of silvery light, fur erupting over skin as they became massive wolves. They fought with a ferocity that made her stomach twist. These were Kaelen's people, his army, his power. And she, a foreign princess with dormant magic she barely understood, was supposed to bind them to peace? She almost laughed again. A knock sounded at the door. 3 sharp raps, firm but not unkind. "Enter," she called. Wary, the door creaked open to reveal a young woman, perhaps no older than Lyriana herself, carrying a tray of food. She had chestnut brown hair braided over one shoulder, warm hazel eyes, and a nervous smile. "My lady," the girl said, bowing slightly. "I am Maris, your attendant while you remain here. The Alpha ordered that you be given anything you need." "Anything I need," Lyriana thought dryly. "Except freedom." Still, she offered the girl a nod. "Thank you, Maris." Maris set the tray on the table, revealing roasted venison, fresh bread, and a goblet of spiced wine. She hesitated, as if debating whether to say more, then blurted out, "Forgive me, my lady, but you stood up to him in the throne room." "No one does that." Lyriana arched a brow. "No one? Not in lives," Maris whispered, glancing at the door as if afraid someone might overhear. "The Alpha. He is fair, but he is ruthless. They say he ripped out the throat of a traitor with his bare teeth in this very hall." Lyriana's stomach clenched, but she masked it with a cool tone. "Good to know. And yet, I still breathe." Maris gave a small, conspiratorial smile. "Perhaps you intrigue him." Lyriana turned back to the window, unwilling to admit how much that idea unsettled her. Or perhaps he simply waits for me to make a mistake. Before Maris could respond, the door burst open without warning. Kaelen strode in. He filled the room instantly, his presence eclipsing everything. He wore no armor now, only a simple black tunic that clung to his broad shoulders and dark trousers tucked into boots. Yet he seemed no less dangerous, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Maris dropped into a hurried bow. "Alpha, leave us," Kaelen ordered. The girl fled without another word, leaving Lyriana alone with him once again. "Do you make a habit of barging into a lady's chambers uninvited?" she asked, turning slowly to face him. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "Do you make a habit of provoking men who could snap you in half? Only when they deserve it." He chuckled low in his throat, and her pulse skipped despite herself. He stalked toward her with that predator's grace, every step deliberate, until he was close enough that the heat of his body brushed against her skin. "You interest me, princess," he said softly. "Most women tremble when they meet my gaze. You meet it like a challenge." "And what do you intend to do about that, Alpha?" His gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. "Find out how long you can keep that fire burning before I make you beg." Her breath caught, not in fear, but something far more dangerous. "Try," she whispered. For a heartbeat, the world held still. The tension between them coiled so tightly it might snap. His hand lifted, fingers brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, lingering by her jaw. Heat flared where he touched her, spreading like wildfire through her veins. Then, a horn sounded from the battlements, one long, mournful note. Kaelen's expression shifted instantly from predator to commander. "Stay here," he ordered, already striding to the door. "Why? What's happening?" "An attack." He glanced over his shoulder, eyes blazing. "And gods help them if they've come for what's mine." And with that, he was gone. Lyriana stood frozen, her heart thundering, the ghost of his touch still burning on her skin. She should have been relieved he had left. Instead, a strange, terrifying truth sank into her chest. She didn't want him to. Chapter 4. The mournful howl of the warning horn reverberated through the Ironfang fortress. A deep, trembling sound that made the very stones of Lyriana's chamber shiver. She raced to the window, her hands gripping the cold sill as she leaned out into the misted night. Far below, the training grounds that had been bustling with sparring wolves just moments ago now erupted into chaos. Warriors shifted mid-run, their bodies rippling with moonlight as fur exploded across their skin. The air was thick with the clashing scents of adrenaline, steel, and something darker, a fetid stench that raised the fine hairs on her arms. Figures moved at the tree line, half-seen shadows too tall, too wrong to be merely wolves. Wraith beasts? Her breath caught in her throat. She had only heard tales of them, creatures born of corrupted magic, neither wolf nor man, their bodies twisted by sorcery older than the moon itself. If the Shadowclaw Alliance had unleashed those, this was not merely a raid. It was war. A sound behind her, footsteps pounding into the corridor outside her chamber. The door burst open, and Maris stumbled inside, her face pale as chalk. "My lady, come!" she gasped. "The Alpha will kill me if you're left unguarded." Before Lyriana could respond, a deafening crash shook the walls. The window behind her exploded inward as a massive clawed hand punched through the stone, sending shards flying. Maris screamed. Lyriana ducked instinctively as the creature hauled itself into the chamber. A hulking silhouette of matted fur, jagged horns, and glowing red eyes. Its maw split open in a snarl, revealing rows of serrated teeth. Time slowed. The beast lunged for Maris. "No!" Lyriana's voice tore from her throat, raw and instinctive. She threw out her hand without thinking, and light erupted from her palm. It was not fire. It was not lightning. It was moonlight, pure and searing. A white-blue blaze that burst from her body and slammed into the creature. The beast shrieked, flinging backward as though struck by a giant's fist, its fur smoking where the light touched. Lyriana stood frozen, chest heaving, her hand still glowing with the strange living fire. Maris stared at her, wide-eyed with terror and awe. "My lady, you're—" Before she could finish, the door slammed open again. Kaelen stormed in, sword in one hand, claws extended on the other. He took in the scene in a single glance, the shattered window, the retreating beast. Writhing in moonlight, Lyriana standing like a goddess of war, with her hand ablaze. For the first time since she had met him, Alpha Kaelen Ironfang looked stunned. "What in the god's name?" he began. The creature roared, charging again. Kaelen moved like a storm. In a blur of motion, he shifted mid-leap, his body erupting into a massive black wolf with eyes like molten gold. He collided with the beast in mid-air, driving it to the floor in an explosion of fur and blood. They rolled in a snarling tangle, teeth snapping, claws raking stone. Lyriana stumbled back, the moonfire still sparking from her skin. She wanted to run, to hide, but something inside her, some ancient instinct, roared louder. She would not be helpless again. She raised her hand once more, focusing on the writhing beast beneath Kaelen's jaws. The power surged up like a tide, fierce and unstoppable, and she let it go. Moonlight engulfed the creature. It screamed once, high, shrill, and inhuman, before it dissolved into ash. Silence crashed down. Kaelen shifted back in a ripple of black fur and human skin, rising to his full height, naked to the waist and spattered with blood. His chest heaved as he stared at her, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling. "You," he said hoarsely, eyes locked on the faint glow still clinging to her skin. "What are you?" Lyriana swallowed hard, unable to look away from him. I don't know." Kaelen stepped closer, slowly, like a predator stalking something precious. His gaze swept over her face, down to her still sparking hand, and back up again. "That was no witchcraft," he murmured. "That was the moon's gift." "I didn't ask for it," she snapped, forcing steel into her voice despite the tremor in her limbs. "I don't even know how I did it." He stopped a pace away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his bare skin. "Whether you asked for it or not, princess, you just saved my pack." His eyes flared gold again, wolf and man blending in their intensity. "And now, you're mine in ways neither of us imagined." Her breath hitched. "I belong to no one." The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, more a promise. "We'll see." A horn sounded again outside, this one shorter, triumphant. The immediate threat was over, but as Kaelen held her gaze, Lyriana realized the real battle had just begun. Not against the Shadowclaw Alliance, but between them. Chapter 5. The warhorn's echo faded into the night, leaving behind a hollow stillness that pressed against the fortress like a suffocating shroud. Outside, the courtyard still buzzed with low growls and commands as warriors secured the perimeter and hauled away the bodies of the fallen. But inside Lyriana's chamber, there was only the sound of her own uneven breathing and the low, predatory rhythm of Kaelen's heartbeat. He had not moved since the moment he claimed her with those last damning words, "Now, you're mine." And she had not looked away, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her falter. But her heart had betrayed her, thundering in her chest like a caged bird. She had killed tonight, slain a creature of shadow with a power she did not understand. And now, standing before this man, this alpha, she felt the weight of what she had done settle into her bones. Kaelen's eyes, still faintly aglow with wolf light, swept over her like a physical touch. He was no longer surprised. Now he was something else, focused, calculating, and hungry, in a way that made her pulse trip. "Get out," he growled suddenly, without looking at her. She blinked. "What?" His gaze flicked to Maris, who was still frozen near the door, trembling like a leaf. "I said leave." Maris bolted without hesitation, the door slamming behind her. Now they were alone. Kaelen stalked forward, each step unhurried but deliberate, like a predator cornering its prey. He stopped mere inches from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "You lied to me," he said softly, dangerously. "I did not," she shot back. "I told you I didn't know what I was—" "That wasn't a lie." He tilted his head, studying her face as though weighing the truth of her words. "That power. I've seen magic before. Witches, spellcasters, blood mages. But that—" He reached out suddenly, gripping her wrist, the one that had burned with moonlight. "That was no sorcery born of earth or blood. That was celestial." Lyriana tried to yank her arm back, but his grip only tightened. "Let go of me, Alpha." "Or what?" His voice was low, taunting, his wolf bleeding through the edges of his words. "Will you burn me too?" For a moment, the temptation to try surged through her veins, to call that strange, luminous fire again and prove she was no one's captive. But the memory of its raw power, wild, uncontrollable, made her hesitate. What if she couldn't stop it this time? Her hesitation did not go unnoticed. His lips curved into something darkly satisfied. "You don't know how to use it," he murmured. "Good. That means you'll need me to teach you control." Her eyes snapped up to his. "And what makes you think I'd let you teach me anything?" He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "Because without control, Princess, that power will eat you alive. And I'm the only one in this cursed land strong enough to handle you when you break." A shiver raced down her spine despite herself. She hated that he could affect her like this. Hated that a part of her thrilled at his nearness. "I don't need you," she forced out. Kaelen pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his own molten gold with conviction. "You may not need me to survive, but you will need me to win." Her breath caught. "Win what?" He released her wrist at last, but not before his thumb brushed deliberately against her pulse point, sending sparks dancing up her arm. "The war that's coming," he said simply. He turned toward the door, his muscles coiled like a panther's, his presence filling the room even as he walked away. "Rest tonight, Princess. Tomorrow, you and I begin training. If you are to be my Luna, you will be strong enough to stand at my side, not behind me." The door opened, then he paused, glancing over his shoulder with a gaze that pinned her where she stood. "And Lyriana?" His voice dropped to a low rumble that stirred something deep in her chest. "Defy me again like you did tonight, and I promise you, I will enjoy breaking that fire of yours until you beg me never to stop." The door shut behind him, leaving her trembling, not with fear, but with a confusing, burning mix of anger and something far more dangerous. Kaelen's POV. The moment he left her chamber, Kaelen's wolf clawed at his insides, restless and snarling. He stalked through the fortress corridors like a storm contained in flesh, ignoring the warriors who bowed as he passed. "Mine." The word throbbed through his skull with every heartbeat. He had not meant to say it aloud earlier, but the moment that Moonfire had erupted from her, he had known. She was not just some political pawn, not just a means to bind his pack to the Crescent Court. She was something else, something rare, dangerous, and fated. His wolf recognized her, and that terrified him more than the war drums outside his borders. He reached the War Council chamber, where his beta Darian awaited with a map strewn across the table. Darian glanced up, his pale silver eyes sharp as a blade. "She did it, didn't she?" Darian asked. Kaelen stiffened. "You saw?" Every wolf in the courtyard felt it, that power. "Kaelen, she's not just Crescent royalty. She's the one from the prophecy." Kaelen's jaw clenched. He didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to admit that the old crones might have been right, that a moon-touched queen would rise to either save or destroy their kind. "She's a weapon," he said coldly, "and I intend to make sure she's pointed at my enemies, not at us." Darian's gaze lingered on him knowingly. "And if you fail? If she decides she won't be wielded?" Kaelen thought of her defiant gray eyes, of the way she had whispered try when he threatened to break her. Heat coiled low in his gut, dangerous and unbidden. "Then I'll tame her," he growled. But even as he said it, some part of him, deep, buried, and half-wild, whispered that she would never be tamed. And God's help him, he wasn't sure he wanted her to be. Chapter 6. The dawn broke over the Ironfang fortress like the blade of a bloody sword, sharp, crimson, and foreboding. Mist clung to the jagged mountains that cradled the citadel, and the cold air carried with it the distant howls of the pack as they greeted the rising sun. Lyriana stood on the balcony of her chamber, dressed in the plain leather trousers and tunic Maris had laid out for her. They fit snugly, designed for movement rather than appearance, though she could feel the underlying tension of what they meant. Today, she would no longer be treated as a guest. Today, she would be tested. A knock came at the door. "Enter," she called, expecting Maris. But it wasn't Maris. King Kaelen filled the doorway like a storm incarnate. He wore black battle leathers that hugged his powerful frame, his dark hair still, damp from an early morning run or shift, and a blade sheathed across his back. The golden glow in his eyes was dimmed now but not absent, simmering like banked embers. "Good," he said, sweeping his gaze over her attire with slow approval. "At least you look less like a caged songbird." Her chin lifted. "Careful, Alpha. Insult me again and I might decide to burn down your pretty little fortress." One dark brow arched. "Promises, princess, or threats?" She ignored the flutter in her chest and strode past him into the corridor. "Lead the way." The training grounds were alive with movement when they arrived. Dozens of warriors drilled in formation, some in human form, others in their massive wolf bodies, their fur rippling like living shadows. The air rang with the clash of steel, the thud of bodies hitting the packed earth, and the low growls of exertion. As Kaelen led her to the center ring, eyes turned, curious, wary, assessing. She could feel their stares like pricks against her skin. To them, she was still an outsider, a political bride, a liability. Kaelen stepped into the ring and faced her. "Today," he said, his voice carrying across the grounds, "you will learn two things: how to defend yourself, and how to control whatever the hell that was you unleashed last night." Murmurs rippled through the gathered warriors. Lyriana swallowed her rising nerves and forced her voice steady. "And what if I refuse?" Kaelen's lips curved in that infuriating, dangerous, almost smile. "Then I'll put you on your back in front of all of them until you beg me to teach you." A startled hush fell over the ring. Heat flared in her cheeks, half from anger, half from the shamelessly double-edged challenge in his words. She stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear her reply. "Careful, Alpha. You might not like how that ends for you." Something hungry flickered in his eyes. "Prove it." The first hour was brutal. Kaelen did not go easy on her. He pushed her relentlessly, forcing her to dodge his strikes, roll with his throws, and pick herself up from the dirt over and over again. His strength was staggering, his speed inhuman, but what infuriated her most was that he never lost control, even when she lunged at him with every ounce of fury she possessed. He countered with effortless precision, never breaking a sweat. Again, he barked as she hit the ground for the 5th time. She spat dirt from her mouth and glared up at him. "Do you always enjoy humiliating your bride in public?" "My bride," he repeated, savoring the word as though testing its weight. "I enjoy forging her into someone who won't die the moment she's challenged." "Forge me then," she snarled, springing to her feet. "But don't think for a moment you'll break me." She charged again, faster this time, feinting left before pivoting right. For the first time, he looked almost surprised as she slammed into his side, knocking him slightly off balance. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Kaelen's wolf surged beneath his skin, his golden eyes flashing as he caught her wrist mid-strike and twisted, reversing their positions in a blur. Suddenly she was pinned against him, her back to his chest, his arm a steel band across her waist. "You're learning," he murmured against her ear, his breath hot and maddening. "But you're still too predictable." She writhed against his hold, her pulse hammering for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "Let me go. Make me—" The words ignited something deep within her. She reached inward, toward that strange shimmering power she'd felt the night before. It answered like a living thing, surging up her veins, flooding her with light. Kaelen felt it the instant it woke. His grip tightened as he growled low in his throat, sensing the raw energy coursing through her. "Good," he rumbled. "Now use it." She did. Moonfire erupted from her skin in a shockwave of pale blue brilliance. Kaelen was thrown back several feet, landing in a crouch, his wolf eyes blazing fully gold now. The warriors around the ring stumbled back, shielding their eyes from the radiance. Lyriana stood in the center of the ring, her hair whipping in an unseen wind, her eyes glowing silver as the moonfire danced across her body. She felt alive, untethered, unstoppable. Kaelen rose slowly, staring at her like she was the first dawn after 1,000 years of darkness. "Enough!" he barked. The command in his alpha tone cracked through her concentration like a whip. The light faltered, then extinguished, leaving her swaying on her feet. In an instant, Kaelen was there, catching her before she could fall. She found herself cradled against his chest, his heartbeat a thunderous drum beneath her ear. "You did well," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Too well." She looked up at him, dazed. Why do you sound angry?" "Because," he growled, his jaw tight, "that kind of power will make every enemy we have come for you. And I don't know if I can kill them all." Her breath hitched at the raw honesty in his words. For a fleeting second, the world narrowed to just the two of them. The heat of his body, the intensity of his gaze, the forbidden urge to close the distance between their lips. Then, a voice cut through the moment. "Alpha." Darian, Kaelen's beta, strode into the ring, his expression grim. "We have a problem. Someone inside the fortress tried to sabotage the southern gate during the attack last night." "A traitor." Kaelen's entire body went rigid. He set Lyriana gently on her feet and turned to Darian, his voice like iron. "Find them, and when you do, bring them to me alive." His gaze flicked back to Lyriana briefly, softer for only a heartbeat. "Stay close to me, princess. Until I root out this snake, you are not safe." And then he was gone, leaving her standing amidst a ring of wary, awed warriors, her skin still tingling with Moonfire and her heart pounding with a new, dangerous realization. The fortress walls might keep enemies out, but they could not protect her from what was happening inside her. Chapter 7. The Ironfang fortress felt different that night. The air carried a tension that no amount of torchlight could dispel. It wasn't just the lingering scent of blood from the attack, it was the unseen weight of suspicion creeping through the halls like a phantom. Every warrior's gaze was sharp, every whisper edged with paranoia. Somewhere within these walls, a traitor lurked, and Kaelen intended to tear them apart piece by piece. Lyriana felt it too, though in a different way. She had spent the hours after training in a state of restless unease, pacing her chamber like a caged predator. Her body still hummed with the echo of Moonfire, her muscles sore from Kaelen's relentless drills. But it was her mind that refused to still. She had unleashed something terrifying today, something that wasn't entirely hers, When the moonfire had surged through her veins, she'd felt alive in a way she'd never known before. Powerful, untouchable. Yet, at the same time, she had felt on the brink of losing herself completely, as if the power would devour her if she didn't master it. And then there was him. Alpha Kaelen Ironfang. Every moment in his presence was a battle of its own. He infuriated her, challenged her, made her want to claw his face, and, God's help her, made her want to taste his mouth. She hated that about him most of all. She stood at the balcony, moonlight washing over her like liquid silver when the door to her chamber opened. She whirled, expecting Maris. It was not Maris. Kaelen stepped inside, silent as a shadow, closing the door behind him, with a final click that seemed to seal them off from the world outside. He was still in his battle leathers, though his tunic hung open at the throat, revealing the taut line of his chest. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. His eyes burned gold in the dim light, fixed entirely on her. "You should lock your door," he said quietly. "I thought no one dared cross the Alpha of Ironfang in his own fortress," she replied coolly. "Most don't," he said, stepping closer, his voice low and dangerous. "But I have a traitor under my roof, and I don't take kindly to those who'd harm what's mine." Her pulse stuttered. "I am not yours." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker amber in his irises. "You keep saying that, princess," he murmured. "And yet you wear my scent." Her breath caught. "What?" He leaned in slightly, inhaling near her throat in a way that was both intimate and primal. "The moment you used that power in my ring, every wolf here knew who you stood beside. My pack can smell it. I can smell it." His voice dropped to a growl. "You smell like me." She should have slapped him. She should have shoved him away. Instead, she stood frozen, her body betraying her as heat pooled low in her belly. "Why are you here, Kaelen?" She managed, her voice a whisper. He drew back just enough to meet her gaze fully. "Because I need answers," he said. "And because I can't sleep knowing you're in this fortress with a target painted on your back." Lyriana frowned, forcing her voice steadier. "What answers?" "Where that power came from," he said bluntly, "and why the hell it calls to me like it does." She stiffened. "Calls to you?" Kaelen's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked as though he might deny it. But then he cursed softly and turned away, running a hand through his hair. "The moment you touched that moonfire, my wolf recognized you. It's primal, irrational. It wants to claim you. Mark you." Her heart lurched. "And what do you want?" He turned back to her slowly, his gaze molten. "I want to keep you alive," he said. "I want to see you master that power so no one can use it against us. And God's help me, princess." He took a deliberate step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I want to see how long you can keep denying what's between us before you break." The silence that followed was deafening. Lyriana's breath came shallow and quick, her chest rising and falling as his words wrapped around her like chains. She wanted to deny it, to tell him there was nothing between them but politics and war. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. Instead, another sound broke the moment, an urgent pounding on the door. "Alpha!" Darian's voice. "We've found the traitor." Kaelen's head snapped toward the door, every trace of vulnerability gone, replaced by lethal focus. "Bring them to the dungeon," he ordered, his voice pure command. "I'll be there shortly." "Yes, Alpha." Footsteps retreated down the corridor. Kaelen looked back at her once more, his eyes softer now, though no less intense. "Stay here," he said. "Lock the door. No one comes in until I return. And if I refuse?" His lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Then I'll put you over my shoulder and bar it myself." Before she could retort, he was gone, leaving her standing in the moonlight with her, heart pounding and her skin still tingling where his breath had ghosted over her neck. Kaelen's POV, the dungeon smelled of damp stone and fear. Kaelen descended the spiral steps 2 at a time, his beta Darian waiting. At the bottom with 2 warriors flanking a bound prisoner. Kaelen's wolf surged the moment he scented the man, one of his own pack, a mid-ranked soldier named Varen. Varen bared his teeth when he saw Kaelen. "Alpha." Kaelen strode forward, his presence filling the chamber like a physical force. "You betrayed your pack." "Why?" Varen spat blood onto the floor. "Because you've already betrayed us. You brought her here, the moon-touched witch. The prophecy says she'll end us all." A low growl ripped from Kaelen's throat. He seized Varen by the collar and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack stone. "She is under my protection," he snarled. "Speak against her again and I'll end you here and now." Varen laughed, a broken sound. "Kill me if you want. The others are already moving. She'll be dead before dawn." Kaelen's blood ran cold. "Others?" But Varen only smiled, blood staining his teeth. Kaelen dropped him, already turning to Darien. "Double the guards around her chamber. No one gets within 10 paces of her without my mark." Darien's eyes sharpened. "You think they'll strike tonight?" Kaelen's wolf growled inside him, furious, protective, hers. "I know they will." And as he strode from the dungeon, one thought consumed him entirely. Let them come. They'll learn what happens when someone tries to take what's mine. Chapter 8. The fortress was too quiet. Lyriana felt it even before the first sound of movement outside her chamber. The kind of silence that wasn't natural. It wasn't peace, it was anticipation. The world holding its breath. She stood near the balcony, moonlight pouring over her as she stared out into the forest beyond Ironfang's walls. The night was clear, stars scattered like spilled silver dust across the sky. Beautiful, serene, and utterly wrong. Maris had retired hours ago, exhausted after helping Lyriana bathe and bind the bruises left from Kaelen's training. Now, the room felt cavernous and lonely. She hadn't locked the door. She told herself it was because she refused to live in fear, that she wouldn't cower like some trapped rabbit. But deep down she knew another reason. She wanted to see if Kaelen would return. Every nerve in her body still hummed from his earlier words. "You smell like me. My wolf wants to claim you. I want to see how long you can keep denying this before you break." Gods. She hated how her body responded to him. How just the memory of his breath against her throat sent heat curling through her stomach. She had never belonged to anyone, never wanted to. Yet, with him, a faint scrape interrupted her thoughts. Her head whipped toward the door. Nothing. Then, again. Softer this time, not the heavy tread of a warrior's boots, more like a gloved hand testing the latch. Lyriana's heart slammed against her ribs. She moved soundlessly, retrieving the slender dagger Kaelen had insisted she keep under her pillow. The moonfire within her stirred, responding to her rising fear. A faint silver shimmer flickering along her skin. The latch clicked. The door eased open, slowly, silently. She didn't wait. With a snarl she didn't recognize as her own, Lyriana slashed upward. Steel met flesh. A man cursed in a guttural tongue and lunged at her, a hooded figure with twin curved blades. She darted back as he swung for her throat, the dagger barely catching the blow. Sparks flew. Another shadow slipped through the door behind him. 3 assassins. Her breath came fast, but she did not scream. She would not die like prey. The first assassin lunged again. Lyriana let the moonfire surge this time. It blazed from her palms in a sudden flare, catching him square in the chest. He shrieked as the silver flame burned through his leathers and skin, collapsing in a smoking heap. The other two hesitated. That was their mistake. The door slammed open with such force it tore from its hinges. Kaelen. He was a storm in human form. Half-shifted, his eyes molten gold, claws glinting under torchlight. His snarl shook the room as he launched at the nearest assassin. They met midair, Kaelen's claws tearing through flesh, spraying crimson across the stone. The last attacker turned to flee. Lyriana didn't think. She flung her hand forward, moonfire streaking like a comet, striking him in the back. He convulsed, screamed, and went still. Silence. Only the sound of Kaelen's ragged breathing filled the chamber. Slowly, he turned to her. Her dagger trembled in her grip, her chest heaving. She expected him to berate her for not locking the door, for nearly dying. Instead, he crossed the space between them in 2 strides and seized her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, frantic. She shook her head. "No, His arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him. The world seemed to tilt. Kaelen Ironfang, ruthless alpha of Ironfang, was holding her like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. "I smelled your fear," he murmured into her hair. "It nearly drove me mad." Lyriana froze, then slowly, almost against her will, melted into him. His warmth surrounded her. His heartbeat thundered against her cheek. When he drew back, his hand stayed on her face, thumbs brushing away a smear of blood she hadn't realized was on her jaw. His gaze locked with hers, intense, unguarded. "You fought," he said softly. "Like a queen." Her throat tightened. "And you came." Something flickered in his eyes, something raw. "I will always come for you." The words were barely out before his mouth was on hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was fire meeting fire, fierce and consuming, all the tension between them igniting in an instant. She tasted his desperation, his relief, his hunger. She answered with her own, fingers fisting in his shirt, as she kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally tore apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "They wanted you dead because of what you are," he said hoarsely. "It's time you knew why." He led her to the table by the window, where Darian had left a sealed scroll earlier that night. Kaelen broke it open, revealing ancient parchment marked with silver runes. "The prophecy of the moon touched," he said grimly, "passed down through the first wolf bloodlines." He read aloud, voice like iron, "When the world is shadowed and the moon bleeds silver, she shall rise, born of flame and sorrow. She will unite the broken pacts, or destroy them all. Crowned in Moonfire, she will choose, mate of the Alpha King, or doom of his kind." Lyriana stared, the words sinking into her bones. "Mate of the Alpha King." Her gaze lifted to Kaelen's. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Fear, hope, longing all tangled together. "What does it mean?" she whispered. "It means," he said quietly, "that you are either my salvation or my ruin." And as the moonlight bathed them both, Lyriana realized that for the first time in her life, her fate was no longer her own. Chapter 9. The fortress no longer felt like a fortress. By dawn, Ironfang was a cauldron of unrest. Word had spread like wildfire, assassins in the Alpha's keep in his bedchamber wing. The pack was in chaos, suspicion gnawing through every hall, whispers sharpening like knives. Lyriana could feel it even as she dressed in the garments Maris laid out for her. A fitted tunic of midnight blue leather, trimmed in silver threading to signify her new status as the Alpha's chosen. She despised how the fabric hugged her form, how it made her look like she belonged here, like she was part of Kaelen's world. She wasn't. Not really, not yet. But the prophecy. Her hands stilled on the laces of her tunic as she thought of the words again. Mate of the Alpha King, or doom of his kind. Is that what I am to them? She turned from the mirror just as Maris bustled back in, her usually calm demeanor frayed with unease. "They've gathered in the great hall," Maris said, voice low. "The entire war council, the elders, everyone." Lyriana nodded, though her stomach tightened. "And Kaelen?" "Already there, waiting for you." The great hall of Ironfang Fortress was carved from black stone, high-ceilinged and hung with banners bearing the sigil of the pack, a wolf's head crowned in flame. This morning, those banners might as well have been funeral shrouds. Hundreds filled the space. Warriors in steel and leather, elders in ceremonial robes, the council seated on the raised dais. At the center stood Kaelen, arms crossed over his chest, radiating barely contained fury. The moment Lyriana entered, the hall fell silent. She felt every gaze pierce her skin. Hostility, curiosity, fear. Kaelen's eyes found hers instantly, molten gold in the torchlight. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. But the subtle incline of his head told her everything. Stand tall. Don't show weakness. She walked to his side, spine straight despite the tremor in her hands. One of the elders rose, Elder Vorin, thin, sharp-eyed, his white hair braided with iron beads. "So," he said, voice cutting through the hush, This is the woman for whom we now bleed. Lyriana's jaw clenched, but Kaelen's hand brushed hers under the table, quick, grounding. She is the one the prophecy speaks of, Kaelen said coldly, and she was the target of an assassination attempt last night within our walls. This is no longer a matter of debate. She stays under my protection. Murmurs rippled. Vorin sneered. Protection? Or possession, Alpha? We all saw how you marked her presence last night. Is this prophecy truth, or simply your lust dressed as destiny? The room erupted, some voices agreeing, others snapping back. The tension was a living thing, thick and dangerous. Kaelen's power lashed out like a whip. He didn't raise his voice, but the air itself seemed to bow under his alpha command. Silence. Instant obedience. Even Vorin's lips pressed shut, though his eyes burned with challenge. Kaelen stepped forward. Every inch the ruthless ruler they feared. The attack proves what I have warned you for months. Enemies gather beyond our borders. Someone does not want the moon touched to rise. They fear her because she is our chance to unite the pacts, to end the centuries of bloodshed that have left us weak, and if they fear her, then we will protect her all the more fiercely. His gaze swept the hall. Or have you forgotten what it means to be Ironfang? For a heartbeat, pride flickered in the room, but then Vorin's voice, oily soft, slithered back in. And if she is not salvation, but ruin? Will you gamble the survival of our kind on a woman you barely know? All eyes shifted to Lyriana. Kaelen looked at her too now, as if silently asking, Will you answer? Will you fight for this place? For me? She drew a breath and stepped forward before she could lose her nerve. I didn't ask for this, she said, voice clear despite the pounding of her heart. I didn't ask to be dragged from my life, forced into your politics, hunted by strangers in the night, but I didn't run last night either. I fought. I killed to survive. And I will again. Not because I owe you my life, but because no one will decide my fate for me, not your enemies, not even you. The hall was silent. Some of the warriors smirked in approval. Others stared in shock at her defiance. Kaelen's lips curved, not in amusement, but in something darker, hungrier. Pride. Spoken like a queen, he said softly. The council adjourned under uneasy truce, but Kaelen did not release Lyriana when they left the hall. Instead, he drew her into a side corridor, empty and shadowed. You realize you just challenged my entire council, he murmured, low and dangerous. She lifted her chin. Would you have preferred I cowered? He stepped closer, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. No, I prefer you exactly as you are. Her breath caught as his hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. But now they will watch you even more closely. They will test you, and some will try again to kill you. Then teach me to survive, she said. His eyes flared. Careful, little flame. You're asking for more than you realize. Am I? She whispered. Or are you afraid of what I'll become? A growl rumbled from his chest, low and possessive. I am afraid of nothing. Except... He hesitated, then leaned in, lips brushing the shell of her ear. Losing you before I can make you mine. She shivered, every nerve alight. And for one dangerous perfect moment, she wanted nothing more than to let him. But before she could speak, a horn sounded from the battlements above, 3 long, mournful notes. Kaelen went rigid. Enemy sighted at the borders. He released her and turned, all alpha once more. Stay here. No. He froze, glanced back. I fight with you, she said. And this time, he didn't argue. Chapter 10. The horn's mournful wail still echoed across the fortress walls as Kaelen strode from the hall, his long legs devouring the stone steps 2 at a time. Lyriana followed close behind, her heart hammering in her chest, not just from fear, but from the fierce, reckless determination blazing through her veins. Outside, the dawn sky was painted with bruised purples and streaks of red, a sky promising war. The fortress gates loomed ahead, their massive ironwood timbers reinforced, with silver rivets that gleamed faintly in the rising sun. Beyond them, the forests of Ironfang stretched wild and unbroken, and somewhere out there, death waited. Report. Kaelen's voice cracked through the morning air like thunder as they reached the battlements. A scout dropped to one knee, panting. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with blood that wasn't entirely his own. Alpha, raiders at the Black Pine Ridge. 20 at least, maybe more. They bear no sigil but their leader. He swallowed hard. He wore bone armor, sir, pale as death. Not wolf. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. Bone armor, not wolf. Wraithborn, he muttered under his breath. Lyriana's head snapped toward him. What are Wraithborn? Kaelen's jaw tightened. Predators, not shifters, not human. Something in between. They hunt for blood, for magic, for sport, and they never attack without being paid to. Her stomach twisted, so someone sent them. He met her gaze, and for a moment the unspoken truth passed between them. Someone, inside or allied with the pack, wanted her dead badly enough to hire monsters. Sound the muster, Kaelen commanded. All warriors to arms, archers on the wall, open the armory. The scouts saluted and sprinted off. Kaelen turned to Lyriana. You stay here, he said, voice hard. No, she replied instantly. His eyes flashed gold, alpha dominance pressing down like a physical weight. This is not a request. She stepped forward until she was chest to chest with him, refusing to bow to his power. You told me yourself, they'll keep coming for me, so either I learn to defend myself now, or I die cowering behind stone walls while you fight my battles for me. For a long moment, they stared at each other, his control and her defiance clashing like steel on steel. Then slowly a wicked smile curved his lips. Fine, he growled, but you fight at my side. If you leave it, I will drag you back in chains. She didn't flinch. The muster was swift. Ironfang warriors poured into the courtyard, massive men and women, there, bodies built for war, fur-lined cloaks discarded for leather and steel. Some shifted, towering wolves with eyes alight in the sun. Others remained in human form, bearing axes, spears, and curved blades etched with silver runes. Kaelen took his place at their head, a living embodiment of war. His armor was black leather reinforced with plates of dark steel, his sword, Fang, slung across his back. When he spoke, his voice carried across the courtyard with unshakable authority. Today, they test our strength. Today, they seek to take what is ours. Show them what happens to those who dare. A roar erupted from the warriors, a sound that shook the very ground. Lyriana's heart pounded. She'd never seen such raw, primal unity. It terrified her. It thrilled her. And when Kaelen turned to her, handing her a slender blade with a hilt of blackened silver, her fingers curled around it without hesitation. It's light, he said, eyes locked on hers. Fast, aim for throats, tendons, or hearts, and listen for my voice above all others. She nodded once. I will. They moved as one, the gates swinging wide with a deep, groaning sound. The Black Pine Ridge lay just a mile beyond, its twisted trees cloaked in perpetual mist. As they crested the rise, Lyriana's breath caught. The Wraithborn were waiting, tall, sinewy figures clad in armor made of bleached bone, their faces hidden behind skull-like masks. Their weapons were jagged, cruel things, blades meant not just to kill, but to maim. And their leader stood at the forefront, a giant of a creature, his armor etched with runes that pulsed faintly blue. When he removed his mask, Lyriana's stomach lurched. His skin was ash pale, his eyes pits of inky black, and when he smiled, his teeth were all needle-sharp. Alpha Kaelen of Ironfang, the creature hissed, voice like dead leaves in the wind. Give us the girl, and we will let you live. Kaelen's answering laugh was pure menace. Come and take her, carrion. And then the world exploded into chaos. The first wave hit like a storm. Wolves surged forward, meeting the Wraithborn head-on with snarls and steel. Kaelen was a blur of lethal grace, Fang, carving through bone and flesh alike. He moved like the battle was an extension of himself. Every strike precise, every parry instinctive. Lyriana stayed at his side as best she could, slashing at anything that came too close. Fear pounded in her blood, but so did something else, something hot and wild that made her limbs faster, her senses sharper. A wraithborn lunged for her, too quick to block. She raised her blade, and something inside her snapped open. Light burst from her hand, white gold and searing, slamming into the creature's chest. It shrieked, body convulsing before crumbling to ash. She stared, panting. What was that? Kaelen saw, and for the first time in his life, he looked shaken. Moonfire. He breathed. Ancient power, only wielded by those chosen by the moon goddess herself. Another attacker came, and instinct took over. Lyriana flung out her hand again, and the light roared forth. Pure, blinding, cleansing. The battlefield faltered as both ally and enemy turned to see her. Standing amidst the carnage, glowing like a star fallen to earth. The wraithborn leader's eyes narrowed. So, it is true. He lifted his blade, runes blazing. Kill her! The fight turned savage. Wraithborn poured toward her like a tide. Kaelen fought like a man possessed, cutting down anything that dared near her. But they were too many, and even with her strange new power, she was tiring. Then from the tree line, a second force emerged. Wolves, but not of Ironfang. Their pelts were gray streaked with silver, their eyes a piercing blue. Kaelen cursed under his breath. Silverpeak pack, he spat. Traitors. Lyriana's gaze darted to him. Allied with the Wraithborn? Or bought by them, he snarled. This is no raid, this is an extermination. As the two packs clashed, the world became blood and steel and fire. Lyriana's power flared again and again, burning through enemies until she could barely stand, and still they came. Finally, the Wraithborn leader himself reached her, his runed blade raised high. Die, witch! She had no strength left to block, no strength left to run. But before the blow could land, Kaelen was there, throwing himself between them, Duskfang catching the strike. Sparks flew as their blades locked, Kaelen's face a mask of fury. You will not touch what is mine, he growled. With a roar, he drove Duskfang through the creature's chest, shattering the runes. The leader shrieked, body unraveling into smoke. The remaining Wraithborn faltered. Then fled into the forest, taking the Silverpeak turncoats with them. Silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded. Kaelen turned to Lyriana, who swayed on her feet. You saved us, he said hoarsely. Her knees buckled, and he caught her, cradling her against his chest. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We saved each other. And as unconsciousness took her, Kaelen pressed his forehead to hers, his heart, thundering with a truth he could no longer deny. He was falling in love with her. Chapter 11. The fortress smelled of blood and smoke. Kaelen carried Lyriana through the gates, his arms unyielding as iron even as exhaustion weighed heavy on his shoulders. Around them, warriors limped, healers rushed, and the courtyard was alive with the groans of the injured and the soft, terrible keening of those mourning their dead. But he saw none of it. All he could see was her, pale, unconscious, yet still warm against his chest. The faint shimmer of that strange light still clung to her skin, like moonlight refusing to fade. It made something inside him ache, a raw, primal need to protect what was his. Clear the chambers, he ordered curtly as they reached the keep. Servants scattered, bowing low. He strode straight to his private quarters, his sanctuary, no other feet but his ever having crossed the threshold. He laid her gently on the massive bed draped in furs, then stripped off his gauntlets with shaking hands. Lyriana, he said softly, crouching beside her. Open your eyes. For a moment, nothing. Then her lashes fluttered, and she groaned faintly. Relief slammed into him so hard he nearly staggered. You stubborn little wolf, he whispered, though she wasn't truly a wolf. You scared the life out of me. Her eyes opened, dazed, unfocused, but alive. Kaelen? I'm here, he said instantly, taking her hand. You're safe. Memory returned in a rush. She jerked upright, eyes wide. The battle. Won, he interrupted firmly, pressing her back down. Barely. Thanks to you, she blinked, as if unsure whether to believe him. That light, what was it? Moonfire, he said, studying her face. A gift of the moon goddess. It hasn't been seen in centuries. It chose you." Her lips parted in shock. "Why me?" "That," he admitted, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek, "is the question. That will keep every alpha and king awake at night once they learn of it." She shivered. "They'll come for me, won't they?" His jaw clenched. "Let them. They'll die for trying." Something in his voice, feral, absolute, made her heart stutter. She looked at him then. Really looked. The blood on his skin, the tension in his shoulders, the unspoken vulnerability in his eyes that no one else would ever see. "You risked everything for me," she whispered. He didn't answer, just stared at her as if memorizing every detail of her face. Finally, in a voice rough with suppressed emotion, he said, "I would do it again, 1,000 times." Silence stretched, heavy and electric. She felt it, the pull between them, fierce and undeniable. The world outside might have been crumbling, but here, in this room, there was only them. Her fingers, almost of their own will, brushed the line of his jaw. "Kaelen." He caught her hand, held it against his cheek, and something inside him shattered. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a claiming, a collision of need and fear and longing that had been building since the moment he'd first seen her. She gasped against his mouth, and he deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping into hers, his body caging hers against the bed. Lyriana's world tilted. She should have been afraid, of him, of what they were, of what this meant. But all she felt was alive, her hands fisted in his tunic, dragging him closer. And he growled, low in his throat, a sound that sent heat flooding through her. "Tell me to stop," he rasped against her lips. "Don't you dare," she whispered back. That was all the permission he needed. He shed his armor piece by piece. Each thud of metal on stone a drumbeat of anticipation. Beneath it, he was all hard muscle and scars, a body forged by war and burdened by responsibility. Her fingers traced those scars reverently, and he hissed in pleasure, eyes darkening to molten gold. When he removed her torn dress, he did so with surprising tenderness, as if unwrapping something precious. She lay bare before him, moonlight from the high window bathing her skin in silver. "Beautiful," he murmured, voice reverent, "my beautiful, impossible witch." She pulled him down to her, and when his mouth closed over hers again, the world ceased to exist. Their lovemaking was fire and storm, hungry, desperate, but threaded with something deeper neither dared name. He worshipped every inch of her with his hands and mouth coaxing, gasps and moans from her lips, until she was trembling beneath him. And when he finally joined with her, it was with a groan of pure relief, as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. They moved together in a rhythm as old as the moon itself, each thrust a silent vow, each kiss a promise. She clung to him, nails digging into his back, and when she shattered beneath him, crying out his name, he followed with a roar, burying himself deep as his world broke and remade itself around her. Afterward, he gathered her into his arms, holding her as if to shield her from the entire world. "You're mine now," he murmured against her hair. Not just by vow, by choice. She smiled, sleepy but fierce. "Then you're mine too." And as exhaustion finally claimed them both, neither noticed the shadow lurking beyond the door, listening. Chapter 12. Morning came quietly to Ironfang Keep, though the air outside was far from peaceful. Lyriana awoke to warmth, a solid, strong body wrapped around hers, a protective arm draped over her waist. For a long moment, she simply lay there, eyes closed, listening to the steady beat of Kaelen's heart against her back. It was strange how safe she felt here, in the bed of the most feared alpha in the realm. Her fingers brushed his hand lightly, tracing the calluses earned from decades of war. Memories of last night flickered through her mind, his mouth, his touch, the way. He had looked at her as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. Heat crept up her neck, and she bit her lip to stifle a smile. "You're thinking too loudly." His deep voice rumbled behind her, still rough from sleep. She started, "I didn't know you were awake." "I wasn't," he admitted, nuzzling her neck lazily. "But my mate's scent turned sweet as honey. hard to ignore. She flushed scarlet. "We're not mated," she protested weakly. He shifted, rolling her onto her back so he could look down at her. His golden eyes were molten, but there was an edge of seriousness beneath the teasing. "Not yet," he said quietly. "But last night, that was more than just desire, Lyriana. You know it." Her throat tightened. She did know. She felt it in her bones, as undeniable as the rising sun. Before she could respond, a heavy knock sounded at the door. Kaelen's expression darkened instantly. "Enter," he barked, rising fluidly from the bed and pulling on his trousers. The door opened to reveal Garrick, his battle-scarred beta, who took one glance at Lyriana in the Alpha's bed and froze. His eyes widened briefly before he schooled his features into neutrality. "My lord," Garrick said, bowing, "the council demands your presence, urgently." Kaelen's jaw ticked. "Of course they do. What's happened?" Lyriana asked, sitting up and clutching the fur to her chest. Garrick hesitated, clearly reluctant to speak in front of her, but Kaelen snapped, "Say it." "The enemy retreat was too clean," Garrick admitted. "No bodies left behind. Scouts report strange activity in the northern woods, symbols carved into trees, and..." He glanced at Lyriana, then back at Kaelen. "Rumors are spreading. About the girl, about what she did on the field." Lyriana's stomach twisted. "Moonfire," she whispered. Garrick nodded grimly. "Every pack within 50 leagues will hear of it within a day. Some will see her as a blessing. Others will see her as a weapon," Kaelen finished coldly. The air inside was thick with tension. Alphas from Ironfang's allied clans filled the circular hall, their voices a low hum of suspicion and curiosity. Kaelen strode to the head of the table, Lyriana at his side despite Garrick's warning glance. He wanted her there. Let them all see whom he stood with. One of the elders, a hawk-eyed she-wolf named Mavira, rose first. "We have heard troubling whispers, Alpha Kaelen, that the human girl you brought into our midst wields the power of the moon itself. Is this true?" "She is not a girl," Kaelen said, voice like ice. "She is my bride, and yes, she carries Moonfire." Gasps rippled through the chamber. "Then she is a threat," snarled another Alpha. "Such power cannot be left unchecked." Lyriana flinched, but Kaelen's aura flared, filling the room with crushing dominance. "Say another word against her," he growled, "and I'll tear out your throat where you stand." Silence fell. Even the bravest among them paled under his wrath. Mavira, however, was unfazed. "Power like that draws enemies. We cannot ignore the implications. Do you know what this means, Kaelen? There is an old prophecy." "Prophecies are the tools of cowards," he cut her off, but Lyriana's heart skipped. "What prophecy?" she asked softly. Mavira's gaze shifted to her, sharp and assessing. "The prophecy of the silver flame. It speaks of a woman not born of wolf blood who will rise with Moonfire to either unite the packs or burn them to ash, and that her bond will decide the fate of all shifterkind." The words hung in the air like a blade. Lyriana's hand trembled in Kaelen's. "And you think that's me?" "I think," Mavira said carefully, "that fate has a cruel sense of humor, and that someone in this very room would kill you before risking that prophecy coming true." At that, Kaelen's eyes scanned the council like a predator, and Lyriana swore she saw. One of the Alphas, Veyric of the Thornpelt clan, look away just a second too quickly. There's the traitor, she thought, cold dread coiling in her gut. Later, in the privacy of their chambers, Kaelen slammed his fist into the stone wall. "They'll come for you. Maybe not openly, but they will try." Lyriana touched his arm gently. "Then let them. I'm not as weak as they think." He looked at her then, truly looked, and pride swelled in his chest. "Moonfire or not," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. "You're the fiercest damn thing I've ever seen." She rested her forehead against his. "Then let's prove them wrong. Together." Unseen by either of them, a raven perched on the windowsill took flight into the night, a messenger carrying word of the prophecy to a far greater enemy. Chapter 13. The night felt wrong. Lyriana sensed it long before the alarms rang. There was a stillness in the air, heavy and suffocating, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She sat in Kaelen's chambers, staring out the tall windows at the moonlit courtyard below. Kaelen had left hours ago to patrol the outer perimeter with Garrick, refusing to leave anything to chance after the council meeting. She couldn't shake Mavira's words from her mind. The woman with Moonfire will either unite the pacts or burn them to ash. A sound pricked her ears, faint, almost imperceptible, the whisper of steel leaving a sheath. Her heart lurched. Slowly, silently, she turned. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room. Tall, hooded, moving like smoke. "Who are you?" she demanded, forcing her voice steady. No answer, only a blur of motion as the figure lunged, twin daggers flashing. Lyriana barely had time to react. She threw herself sideways, the blade slicing through the air where her throat had been. She hit the ground hard, rolled, and scrambled to her feet. The assassin advanced without a word. "Guards!" she screamed, but the sound was swallowed by a strange, thrumming silence, a spell. She was cut off. "Think, Lyriana. Think." The assassin struck again, swift and precise. She dodged, barely, but one blade grazed her arm. Pain burned like fire, and when she glanced down, her blood glowed faintly silver. Moonfire. The assassin hesitated at the sight, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Something deep inside her responded to the wound, to the threat, to the primal instinct to survive. The air around her shimmered. Her body moved almost on its own as she thrust her hand forward. Light erupted from her palm, a surge of white-hot flame that engulfed the assassin's chest. He screamed, a sound inhuman and shrill, as the fire devoured him from within. In seconds, nothing remained but ash. Lyriana collapsed to her knees, chest heaving, eyes wide in shock. The door burst open. Kaelen stormed in, sword in hand, Garrick at his side. "Lyriana!" She looked up at him, trembling. "Kaelen, he tried to." Then she saw his face, pale with rage and fear, and something inside her broke. She ran to him, and he caught her, crushing her against his chest. "I left you for one goddamned hour," he snarled, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. "1 hour. I'm okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Garrick crouched near the pile of ash. "This was no ordinary assassin," he muttered. "See these?" He held up the charred remnants of a dagger hilt, marked with strange runes. "Witchcraft." Kaelen's jaw tightened. "Send word to Mavira. Seal the keep. No one enters or leaves without my command." Garrick nodded and left. Kaelen tilted her chin up, his gaze searching hers. "Show me," he said quietly. She hesitated, then lifted her hand. Moonfire still lingered faintly on her skin, like liquid starlight. Instead of fear, Kaelen's eyes darkened with something else. Pride, awe, possession. "You killed him," he murmured. "You burned him to nothing." "I didn't mean to," she admitted, voice shaking. "It just happened." He cupped her face gently. "Good. Let it happen again. Next time, don't hesitate." She stared at him, stunned by the ferocity in his tone. "Kaelen, I swear on the bones of my ancestors," he growled. "Whoever sent that assassin will drown in their own blood. And if this prophecy makes you a target, then I'll burn the world to keep you safe." Something in her chest ached at his words, raw and brutal as they were. She leaned into him, and for a moment, the fear faded, replaced by a fierce, unspoken promise between them. Later that night, far below Ironfang Keep, in the catacombs lit by guttering torches, Alpha Varric met with cloaked figures. She survived, he spat, slamming a fist against the stone table. And worse, she unleashed Moonfire. A hooded witch across from him smiled thinly. "Good. Let the prophecy unfold. The more they fear her, the easier she will be to manipulate." "And Kaelen?" The witch's smile widened. "He will destroy himself trying to protect her. All we need do is guide him to ruin." By morning, Kaelen had made his decision. "We leave Ironfang today," he told Lyriana, as she donned her riding leathers. "There's someone beyond these lands who knows more about this power of yours." If I keep you here, they'll keep coming. Out there, at least, we can strike first. She glanced at the keep behind them, its towers rising against the pale sky. Will it be safe without you? He mounted his black warhorse and offered her his hand. Safe enough. Besides, his lips curved in a dangerous smile. We'll be back, with answers, and with every enemy who dares touch you lying in pieces at our feet. She took his hand. Together, they rode into the wilds, unaware that dozens of eyes followed. Their departure, some filled with hope, others with malice. The game had begun. Chapter 14. The forest beyond Ironfang was alive with sound. Chirping insects, rustling leaves, distant wolf calls. But beneath it all lay an ominous hum. It was a subtle thing, like the tremor before an earthquake, but Kaelen felt it in his bones. They had been riding for hours, the morning sun barely breaking through the dense canopy above. Lyriana stole a glance at him. He looked unyielding as ever, broad shoulders straight, jaw clenched. His black cloak flowing behind him like the shadow of a predator. But she had begun to notice the cracks, the way his hand hovered near the hilt of his sword even when no threat was in sight, the faint tension around his eyes, the restless energy of a wolf denied the fight he craved. Is it always like this? She asked finally, breaking the silence. Kaelen turned his head slightly. What? Being alpha? Carrying the weight of everyone's survival on your back? His mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. It's like drowning. And everyone's clinging to you, hoping you'll drag them to shore before you sink. She looked away, the answer cutting deeper than she expected. Elsewhere, Ironfang Keep Garrick strode into the war room, face grim. The council had convened again in Kaelen's absence, and already he smelled treachery. Alpha Varric stood at the head of the table, his silver hair gleaming. In the torchlight, his expression calm, but eyes sharp as blades. Brothers, Varric began. Kaelen abandons us to chase fables in the wilds, while enemies gather at our borders. Does this sound like leadership to you? A murmur of dissent rippled through the room. Garrick slammed his hand down. Watch your tongue, Varric. He left to protect what might be our only hope. Hope? Varric sneered. You mean the outsider? The girl who brings assassins to our door? The one who wields power we cannot control? She saved Kaelen's life and yours when that assassin struck, Garrick shot back. Varric's gaze flickered briefly, anger, quickly masked. Perhaps. But we cannot ignore the risk she poses. The other packs whisper already. About Moonfire, about prophecy. Do you think they'll rally to Kaelen's side? Or turn on him as they have turned on others before him? He let the words hang, poisonous as venom. On the road, Lyriana's horse whinnied nervously. Kaelen's head snapped up, nostrils flaring. Dismount, he ordered sharply. She obeyed instantly, trusting his instincts by now. He led both mounts off the trail and into the cover of thick undergrowth just as a branch cracked nearby. 5 figures emerged from the shadows of the trees. Rogue wolves, their eyes glinting with feral hunger. One stepped forward, tall and scarred, with a cruel grin. Ironfang Alpha, he drawled. Thought we'd find you out here. Thought maybe you'd be alone. Guess you brought a prize with you instead. His gaze slid to Lyriana, and Kaelen's entire body stiffened, a low growl rumbling in his chest. You can leave, Kaelen said coldly, drawing his sword. Or you can die. The rogues laughed. Then Kaelen moved. It was over almost as soon as it began. He was a storm of steel and shadow, cutting down 3 before they even had a chance to shift. Lyriana stood frozen, heart pounding as blood sprayed the leaves around them. The last 2 rogues turned tail to flee, until Lyriana raised her hand, instinct taking over. A flare of moonfire arced through the air, striking one in the back. He screamed as light consumed him. The other escaped into the forest. Kaelen turned to her, chest heaving, eyes dark with something wild. You hesitated less this time, he said. She swallowed hard. Does that make me a monster? He stepped closer, sword dripping red. It makes you alive. And then he kissed her. It wasn't soft or sweet. It was raw, fierce, almost violent, born of blood and fear and desire all tangled together. She melted into him, clutching his shoulders as though he were the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to shatter. When he finally pulled back, his voice was hoarse. "Don't ever ask me again if you're a monster. You're mine, and I will kill anyone who tries to take you from me." Back at Ironfang, Varric watched as emissaries from rival pacts arrived at the gates. "Tell them Kaelen is gone," he instructed his steward. "Tell them Ironfang needs new leadership, and when they ask about the girl, tell them she carries death in her veins." The first seeds of rebellion had been planted. Later, in the wilderness, Kaelen and Lyriana sat by a small fire, the forest alive with unseen life. She traced a finger over his knuckles, still stained with blood. "Do you ever wonder what would happen if we fail?" He looked at her, eyes gleaming in the firelight. "I don't think about failing. I think about tearing apart anyone who stands in our way until there's nothing left." She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "And after? When it's over?" He hesitated. Then, for the first time, his voice softened. "After, I'll build you a home where no one can touch us. No councils, no prophecies, just you, just me." Something in her chest warmed at the promise, fragile and fierce all at once. But far above them, in the branches, a raven watched silently before, taking flight, carrying news of their location to darker forces still. The game was no longer just beginning. It was accelerating toward war. Chapter 15. The first signs of dawn painted the horizon in muted gray, but the world felt anything but calm. Kaelen stood on the edge of a jagged cliff, overlooking the sprawling forest that separated them from the Bloodfang Mountains, the place where, according to every fragment of lore they had pieced together, the source of Lyriana's magic awaited. The wind whipped his cloak violently, and beside him, Lyriana clutched her own arms tightly, shivering not from the cold, but from the weight of everything pressing down upon her. "You feel it, don't you?" she murmured, staring into the distant mist. He turned to her. "What?" "The storm coming. It's like the earth itself is holding its breath." Kaelen didn't answer. Because she was right. Something was building. At home, on these roads, inside him, and he had no idea how much longer he could keep all the pieces from shattering apart. Inside Ironfang's great hall, chaos reigned. Dozens of alphas from neighboring packs had gathered under Varric's summons, their voices clashing in a storm of accusations and fear. "Kaelen has abandoned you," one barked. "While the eastern clans gather armies at your borders, he hides behind a foreign witch," another snarled. At the head of the table, Varric raised his hands for silence. "Brothers, brothers, we need not let our rage consume us. There is a simple solution." He leaned forward, silver hair gleaming, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that nevertheless carried across the hall. "We declare Kaelen unfit to rule. We name a new alpha of Ironfang, one who will put our people first, one who will deliver us from the chaos his bride has brought upon us." A ripple of agreement moved through the hall, and in the shadows near the door, Garrick clenched his fists, every instinct in him screaming to tear Varric apart where he stood. But there were too many here, too many who believed the lies. He would need to warn Kaelen. And soon. On the road, Kaelen and Lyriana were 3 days into their journey. When the attack came, they had stopped by a stream to rest their mounts, when a low growl rumbled from the tree line. Kaelen's sword was in his hand in an instant. "Stay behind me," he hissed, scanning the forest. A heartbeat later, a dozen figures burst from the undergrowth, warriors clad in the crimson. Armor of the eastern clans, their blades already wet with blood from some earlier kill. The fight was brutal. Kaelen moved like death incarnate, cutting down foes with precise, deadly strikes. Lyriana summoned Moonfire to blast enemies back. But there were too many. And then, in the chaos, one of the warriors slipped past Kaelen's guard and drove a spear straight into his side. "Kaelen!" He staggered, eyes wide, blood blossoming across his tunic. Rage unlike anything she had ever known surged through Lyriana. She screamed, and the world around them exploded. Moonfire erupted from her in a blinding torrent, consuming everything within 20 paces. Trees ignited, earth cracked, and when the light faded, every enemy lay dead, or nothing more than ash. Kaelen lay on the ground, barely conscious, and Lyriana dropped to her knees beside him, shaking. "I didn't mean to, I didn't." His bloodied hand caught hers weakly. "Listen, to me." His voice was ragged, each word a struggle. "Don't regret saving me, ever." Tears blurred her vision as she pressed her hands to his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, damn you. I'm not letting you die. Not now, not ever." Night had fallen by the time Garrick slipped from the keep, shifting into his massive wolf form to outrun the patrols Varric had set. His only thought was reaching Kaelen before it was too late, but Varric had anticipated this. A group of loyalists intercepted him on the outskirts of the territory. As they circled him, Varric himself stepped into the clearing, a cruel smile on his face. "Going somewhere, old friend?" Garrick snarled, but Varric only shrugged. "Kaelen's reign ends tonight, and when he returns, if he returns, there will be nothing left for him to claim. Not his throne, not his people, not even his bride." With that, the attack began. Lyriana worked through the night, tending to Kaelen as best she could with what little supplies they had. His breathing was shallow but steady, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked vulnerable, mortal. She brushed damp hair from his forehead and whispered, "I don't care what they say about me. I don't care about prophecies or thrones. I only care about you. Do you hear me, Kaelen? I love you, and I will burn the world down before I let it take you from me." Unseen by her, Kaelen's fingers twitched faintly at her words. Far above them, the moon reached its zenith, casting silver light over the forest, and from its glow, deep in the Fang mountains, something ancient stirred awake. Chapter 16. The forest around them had gone deathly silent. Lyriana's hands were slick with Kaelen's blood as she worked feverishly, her breath coming in harsh gasps. She had torn strips from her cloak to bind his wound, but the bleeding hadn't stopped. His skin had grown pale, his lips tinged with blue, and every moment that ticked by carved another fissure of terror into her heart. "You're not allowed to leave me," she whispered, voice cracking. "Do you hear me, Kaelen? Not after everything we've survived. Not when I've just found you." Her tears dripped onto his chest, mixing with his blood. And then, soft as a breath, his fingers brushed hers, weak, trembling, but deliberate. "You found me," he rasped, voice barely audible. "Don't. Let go." She choked on a sob. "I won't. I swear it. But I can't heal you. I don't have enough power, not like this." Her gaze shot upward to the blood-red moon looming in the night sky. "There has to be something. Please, someone. Anyone." The air shimmered. At first she thought it was a trick of her desperate mind, but then a pale figure coalesced from the mist, a woman, tall and ethereal, with eyes like molten silver and hair cascading like starlight. "You call, child of Moonfire," the figure said, her voice like bells tolling across a void. "And the moon answers." Lyriana staggered back, shielding Kaelen with her body. "Who are you?" "I am Lyriana, last of the Silverborn, keeper of what you are." The figure's gaze softened as it fell on Lyriana. "You have come to the cusp of awakening, yet you fight it." "Why?" Lyriana's throat tightened. "Because every time I use this power, I destroy everything around me. I killed them tonight. I didn't even think, I just burned them alive. Would you rather have let him die?" Selenara's voice was gentle but implacable. "Power is neither mercy nor cruelty. It is what you shape it to be. But it will consume you if you continue to deny what you are." "What I am," Lyriana demanded. "What am I?" Selenara stepped closer. "The last Moonfire queen, the one foretold to either save or end this world. Your bloodline was thought extinguished centuries ago, slaughtered by those who feared what you could become. But here you stand, and the choice of what you will be lies with you." Lyriana's breath hitched. I just want to save him." Selenara knelt beside Kaelen's still form, her spectral hand hovering over his chest. Then bind your power to your heart's will. Choose him, above fear, above fate. If you do, no force will take him from you. Lyriana's hand found Kaelen's once more. His pulse fluttered weakly under her fingertips. I choose him, she whispered. I will always choose him. Moonlight erupted around them. It wasn't the wild, destructive fire of before. It was pure, radiant, and alive. It poured from Lyriana in a torrent of silver light, sinking into Kaelen's body, knitting torn flesh, mending broken blood vessels, breathing life back into him. His chest rose sharply as air rushed into his lungs, and his eyes flew open, golden and blazing with life. Lyriana. His voice was hoarse but strong. His gaze locked on hers, and in that moment, nothing else existed. You saved me. She collapsed against him, sobbing with relief. Don't you ever scare me like that again. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if he would never let go. I won't, I swear it. But their moment of fragile peace was shattered by a howl, a long, defiant howl from the distance. Garrick was running out of time. Ironfang Keep was under siege. Varric's loyalists had thrown open the gates to the eastern clans, and now the halls ran red with blood. Wolves clashed in a frenzy of fur and steel. Garrick himself was a whirlwind of claws and fangs, cutting down enemies left and right. But they were being overrun. Hold the line, he roared to the warriors still loyal to Kaelen. For your alpha, for Kaelen, they shouted back, but their voices were hoarse, desperate. And at the center of it all, Varric stood upon the throne dais, his silver hair matted with blood, his eyes gleaming with madness. Your alpha is dead, he bellowed over the carnage, dead in the wilderness with his cursed bride. Submit to me now, and I will spare your lives. A hush rippled through the chamber. Some wolves faltered. Doubt crept in. Garrick's snarl shook the air. Lies. Kaelen lives, and he will return, and when he does, he'll tear your traitorous throat out, Varric. Varric's smile was razor sharp. Then he had better hurry, because by dawn there will be nothing left to save. The Bloodfang Mountains Kaelen stood shakily, still leaning on Lyriana for support, but his eyes burned with purpose. That was Garrick, he said. He's calling for help. Ironfang is under attack. Lyriana nodded, her newly awakened power still humming under her skin. Then let's end this. They ascended into the heart of the Bloodfang Mountains, where an ancient altar awaited, a place carved from moonstone itself, glowing faintly beneath the crimson sky. This is where you claim it. Selenara's voice echoed faintly around them. Take the Moonfire fully. Bind it to your bond. Together, you will be unstoppable. Lyriana stepped onto the altar, Kaelen at her side. She reached for him, and he clasped her hand tightly. I'm with you, he said simply. She closed her eyes, and the world vanished. Chapter 17. The altar of moonstone thrummed beneath their feet. Kaelen stood tall now, no longer weakened, his golden eyes reflecting the crimson glow of the blood moon overhead. His hand was entwined with Lyriana's, their fingers laced tight, and the energy between them was a living thing, sparking, surging, threatening to ignite the very air. Are you ready? He asked her, voice low, intimate, yet laced with a command that could move armies. Lyriana's silver-threaded hair whipped around her face as the wind rose, responding to the magic within her. She gazed at him, not just at his face but into his soul, and found the answer there. I was born ready, she whispered. With you, I am. He smiled then, sharp and fierce, the smile of a predator in love, and pressed his forehead to hers. Then let's show them what it means to challenge us. The altar blazed to life. Silver light exploded outward, engulfing them. The moonfire surged up Lyriana's veins like molten starlight, seeking, searching, and found Kaelen's heartbeat. His alpha power, wild and primal, met it in a clash of thunder and flame. For a moment it was chaos, pain, ecstasy, fire, ice, but then it merged. They breathed as one, their hearts beat as one. Their souls braided together in a bond stronger than blood, stronger than fate itself. Lyriana gasped, arching back as the power settled into her skin like a second layer, her eyes glowing pure white. Kaelen roared, a sound so deep and resonant that the mountains shook, and, when he opened his eyes, they burned molten gold ringed with silver. "Moonfire Alpha," Selenara whispered from the shadows, "and his queen. The world will kneel." Kaelen turned to Lyriana, awe on his face despite the carnage awaiting them. "You are breathtaking. And you," she said with a small, fierce smile, "are mine." They kissed, hard, desperate, sealing their bond not just with power, but with love. It was brief, for there was no more time to waste, but it was enough. When they pulled apart, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Let's go save your kingdom," Lyriana said. "No," Kaelen replied, stepping forward as the altar cracked beneath their combined might. "Let's go claim it." Ironfang. The final siege, Ironfang Keep, was a slaughterhouse. Wolves fought in every corridor, claws and steel flashing under the sickly red moonlight streaming through shattered windows. The scent of blood and smoke choked the air. Garrick was nearly spent, his great gray form battered and bleeding. He had fought like 10 wolves, but even he could not hold back the tide forever. Around him, the last loyal defenders were falling, one by one. "Fall back!" he bellowed to those still standing. "Fall!" A massive black-furred beta slammed into him, pinning him to the ground. Garrick snarled and snapped, but his strength faltered. Above them, Varric descended the throne steps, calm amidst the carnage. "Pathetic," Varric sneered. "You always were, Garrick, just a mutt following a master. Well, here's your last order. Die." He raised his clawed hand to strike, and the great doors of Ironfang burst open. A gale swept through the hall, extinguishing torches. The temperature plummeted. Every head turned as silver light poured through the doorway like a river. Kaelen and Lyriana walked in side by side. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even the invaders faltered at the sight of them, the Alpha's presence so vast and crushing that it made lesser. Wolves bow without thought, and beside him, the woman who radiated moonlight like a living goddess. Kaelen's voice rang out, deep and unyielding. "Traitors of Ironfang, kneel, or perish." No one moved. Then Varric laughed. "So the ghost returns, and with his little witch bride, I'll kill you both, and your precious pack will thank me for freeing them." Kaelen's lips curled back in a snarl. "You've made your choice." The Battle of Ironfang, the hall erupted. Kaelen shifted mid-stride, his wolf form exploding into existence. A massive beast of black fur laced with silver light, eyes blazing like twin suns. Lyriana raised her hands, and the Moonfire leapt forth, forming whips of silver flame that tore through enemy ranks like paper. Garrick rallied instantly. "For the Alpha!" he roared, and the Loyalists surged with renewed fury. Varric launched himself at Kaelen, steel claws clashing against the Moonfire Alpha's own. They collided in a storm of fur, fang, and raw power, shattering stone columns and sending shockwaves through the hall. Lyriana, meanwhile, became a storm unto herself, her magic searing through invaders, but always shielding the loyal wolves from harm. She was precise now, controlled, her earlier fear replaced by mastery. "Kaelen!" she called, sensing danger. He twisted just as Varric's poisoned blade arced toward his throat, but Lyriana's Moonfire shield intercepted it, burning the weapon to ash. Kaelen used the opening to slam Varric into the throne itself, splintering it in two. "You are done," Kaelen growled, pinning his brother by the throat. Varric spat blood in his face. "You think this is over? The clans will never follow a witch's mate. They'll tear you apart." Kaelen glanced at Lyriana, who stood in the center of the hall, radiant, terrible, beautiful. "Watch them kneel," he said simply. Lyriana lifted her hands and released everything. Silver fire roared through the keep, not destructive but purifying. It swept over every wolf, stripping away deceit, false oaths, and bloodlust. One by one they fell to their knees, not from force but from awe. The Moonfire recognized truth, and they could not deny what stood before them. An Alpha who would not break, A queen who would not bow, together unstoppable. Varric felt it too. And for the first time he knew fear. Kaelen's jaws closed on his throat. When the Moonfire faded, Ironfang belonged to them. Aftermath hours later, the keep was quiet. The dead were mourned, the traitors cast out. In the highest tower, Kaelen and Lyriana stood together, gazing at the now pale dawn. "It's over," she whispered. He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her against him. "No," he said softly. "It's just beginning." She tilted her head up to meet his gaze. "Are you ready for that beginning?" He bent his head and kissed her, slow this time, reverent, claiming not just her lips but her future, their future. When they parted, his forehead rested on hers. "With you," he murmured, "I am ready for anything." Chapter 18. The first true dawn in weeks broke over Ironfang. Gone was the blood-red hue of the cursed moon. In its place, the sky stretched endless in pale gold, kissed with soft pink and silver clouds. The land, ravaged by war, seemed to breathe again. The rivers running clear, the forest's whisper returning on the wind. From the highest balcony of the restored Alpha Keep, Kaelen stood in his ceremonial leathers, obsidian black trimmed in moonlit. Silver, the mark of the Alpha King newly inked across his shoulder, 3 intersecting claw marks filled with luminescent runes. But it was not his title, nor the gathered clans outside the keep that held his focus. It was her. Lyriana emerged from within, and for a heartbeat the world stilled. She wore a gown unlike any ever seen in Ironfang, woven of midnight silk and threads of living moonlight, the design both regal and wild, as if the night sky itself had descended to adorn her. Her hair, silver-tipped from the Moonfire's blessing, flowed loose down, her back crowned with a delicate circlet of crystal and black iron. But what stunned Kaelen most was the look in her eyes, soft, steady, unflinching. No longer the captive bride who had once walked into his life. She was his equal, his queen. Kaelen crossed to her in 3 strides, unable to help himself. His hand cupped her cheek. "You take my breath away." Lyriana's lips curved, teasing despite the flush in her cheeks. "And you've managed to tame that wild mane of yours. Almost." He huffed a laugh, low and rough, and leaned down until their foreheads touched. "Are you ready, Lyriana of the Moonfire?" Her gaze burned into his. "I am ready, Kaelen of Ironfang. Ready to stand beside you, always." The great hall below was packed to the rafters. Every surviving clan Alpha knelt in a half-circle around the dais, their banners lowered. Wolves in human and beast form alike crowded the edges, waiting, watching. The atmosphere crackled with tension, awe, and hope. Kaelen and Lyriana entered hand in hand. A hush fell. Selunara, the ancient seer, stepped forward, her blind eyes fixed unerringly on them. "Before the eyes of the moon, before the spirits of your ancestors do. You pledge yourselves to this land, to your pack, and to each other." Kaelen's voice rang like iron on stone. "I do." Lyriana's followed, clear as a silver bell, "I do." Selunara lifted her staff. "Then rise, Kaelen Ironfang, Alpha King, rise, Lyriana Moonfire, Alpha Queen. And let the world bear witness." The hall erupted in howls and cheers as Kaelen swept Lyriana into his arms and kissed her full on the mouth, deep, claiming, joyous. It was not a polite ceremonial kiss, but the kiss of a male who had fought, and bled for his mate, and would do so again without hesitation. The clans roared their approval. Outside, the dawn sun broke fully, bathing Ironfang in light. That night, the keep was alive with celebration. Feasting, dancing, howls echoing through the mountains. But Kaelen and Lyriana slipped away unnoticed, retreating to the Moonfire chamber atop the highest tower. It was quiet there, save for the soft crackle of a fire and the whisper of the wind through open windows. They stood together at the window, looking out over their realm. "It's beautiful," Lyriana said softly. "It is," Kaelen replied, though he wasn't looking at the land. "But you are beyond words." She turned in his arms, her fingers tracing the markings on his chest where his tunic had fallen open. "Do you ever think," she murmured, "of how different this could have been? If you had never come for me." He caught her hand, pressing it to his heart. "I try not to," he admitted. Because I can't imagine my life without you. I don't want to. Her eyes softened and then he kissed her. Not with the fervor of battle, but with the tenderness of forever. They undressed slowly, reverently, as if savoring the act of simply having each other. When they finally came together, it was unhurried and deep, their bodies moving, in perfect rhythm beneath the moonlight streaming through the window. "Kaelen," she whispered against his neck as he held her close afterward, their limbs tangled, their hearts beating as one. "Do you feel it?" He brushed a kiss over her temple. "What?" "That this is only the beginning." He smiled, drowsy but content. "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life proving to you how much I love you." Outside, the moon rose bright and full, blessing them both. Epilogue. Months later, Ironfang thrived. The clans were united for the first time in centuries. Trade routes reopened, the forests healed, and whispers of the Moonfire Queen, and her ruthless, devoted alpha spread far beyond their borders, becoming legend. In the Alpha Keep's gardens, Lyriana knelt, smiling as she placed a hand over her belly. "Kaelen," she called. He looked up from where he'd been sparring with Garrick, now beta and ever loyal. When he saw her expression, he froze, then crossed the distance in 2 strides, sinking to his knees before her. "Are you—" His voice caught. She nodded, tears sparkling in her eyes. "Yes." For a long moment, he simply held her, arms wrapped tight, his face buried in her hair. Then he pulled back, golden eyes fierce and tender all at once. "They will be born into a world we built," he vowed. "A world where they'll never know the pain we did." She smiled. "And they will be loved." "Beyond all reason," he promised, kissing her once more as the garden filled with the soft song of nightbirds. And so began the reign of Kaelen and Lyriana, the Alpha King and Moonfire Queen, whose love remade a kingdom and whose legacy would endure for generations. The end. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.